Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to episode 115 of the Reformed Gamers, the show all about theology, video games, recording this episode 2 times in 2 weeks. I'm your on-repeat host, Logan.
And I am your hopefully not echoing host, Derek.
And I am your dad gamer host, Jonathan.
So, dear listeners, just to give you guys a little bit of a briefer as to this episode, because we've had Jonathan on the show before, and Derek, you might have been on here once, maybe? I'm not entirely sure.
This is officially my first time.
Oh, this is your first time? Okay, well, we'll have to get to introductions here in a second. But just so you guys know, we tried to record this episode last week. Adam was gone at T4G, so he wasn't able to make it to record. So I thought, not even that far into the episode, I'm already slipping
That
over.
took about 45 seconds.
So I thought this would be a good time to bring together the boys that I used to do a podcast with back in 2014, the 8-Bit Heroes podcast, which, by the way, you can't find on the internet anymore. It is gone forever, except for the original files are on my computer still, which are very interesting to go back and listen to. I've learned a lot when it comes to recording since then. But yeah, so we tried recording this last week, but then something happened with the audio file, so we couldn't get the episode out. So now we're finally getting the episode out, hopefully, Lord willing, and going from there. But yeah, so it's cool to have the boys back together. It's almost like a little 8-bit reunion on the Reformed.
The boys are back in town.
Should be good. Should be good. Now, dear listeners, you guys know Jonathan pretty well enough, but you don't know Derek. Derek, man, tell the dear listeners, what's the streamy thing that you do? What are some games that you've enjoyed? Get the dear listeners a little bit of a primer as to who is Derek.
That's a great question. Get a little all existential on me. Now, streamy thing that you do, or like you talk, like what are you talking about?
You know how you stream on Twitch and all that fun stuff.
No, I wasn't gonna like plug it unless you were like wanting me to.
No, dude. I mean, because you do some sweet body painting on your Twitch channel, right?
Well,
Check out his God of War edition coming up this week.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd get banned in a heartbeat. I just got affiliate, guys. Like, I don't want to get banned off of Twitch. Like, after that.
You'll be okay.
Anyway.
You'll be okay.
I don't go full
Body
sellout
painting.
mode just yet, But anyway, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Derek. This is where guys go, hi, Derek. This isn't like an AA meeting or anything, so don't worry about that.
Or is it?
Hi, Derek. I stream on Twitch a couple days a week, usually. I've known Jonathan and Logan for too long at this point, probably. It's been a long
Too
time.
long.
Each other.
Wow, is that? Wow.
Make it sound like I'm sorry that I annoyed you with my friendship.
I had to throw that little jab in there, but no, like these two dudes are like some of my closest friends. We talk pretty much every day, except not really vocally. It's usually through like Slack or a text message thread or
Carrier
something.
pigeons, owls.
Yeah, smoke signals, have been used.
Yes.
Yes, as far as games go, I do love me some Zelda, some Kingdom Hearts. I'm usually streaming something of that sort, like Let's Play wise. I'm horrible at multiplayer games, and so that's not really my jam. But yeah, it's been like I'm a hardcore. I'm a Nintendo baby. I grew up on the Nintendo consoles and the Game Boys and all of that. So I think Logan, I think you were Sega at one point, weren't you?
I was straddling both sides of the fence on that one. I was a Sega boy and a Nintendo toddler.
You were living the
Yeah,
life.
Nintendo toddler. That's a good one.
Nintendo toddler. Yeah. So as far as outside of the gaming world, I'm a youth minister / children's director at a church in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area. I won't be too specific on that, but that's generally where I am. But yeah, I have a lot of fun with it. And then I'm married to a lovely wife, Lana, of almost 5.5 years now. I had to think about it for a second. So yeah, 5.5 years, and it's a good time. The Lord is good. And I'm glad to be
right
here.
on, man. Well, dear listeners, I'm sure you guys are excited to listen to this episode more and get to know Derek a little bit more and get to hear from us and, well, me and Jonathan. I don't have two personalities. Ugh, this is off the rails already. So, dear listeners, before we get into the show, we got to take care of a little bit of housekeeping here before we jump into the show. As always, if you support us on patreon.com/thereformedgamers at any tier, you get entered into our monthly game giveaway. And since we technically already did this last week, the winners have already gotten their stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and just announce it anyway here on air and pretend like we're doing it again, even though it's already been predetermined. Like,
We'll even clap.
they've already been, I don't know, I was going to make like a Calvinist joke there, but I can't get one. Anyway.
I was going to say, I was literally about to say the same thing.
There you go. But anyway, so our winner of a copy of Owlboy this month, which by the way, my review for that game is up on the website. Fantastic, fantastic game. The winner for that is dear patron Alex Castellanos. Enjoy that game, sir. I know you got it like last week, so enjoy it.
Yay, Alex.
Hopefully you've enjoyed it.
What he's trying to say is he's sending you another one.
He's probably, oh man, okay. I don't know where to go from there. Anyway, so we did a feedback. We did a feedback survey a couple weeks ago for about a month, just trying to get some feedback from you, the dear listeners, and trying to figure out what we can do on the show to improve. We also offered a $10 gift card to your platform of choice should you win. And the winner for that $10 gift card is Isaac Stoltz. Isaac, check your email for more info.
Yay, Isaac.
The Stoltz.
The Stoltzmeister. Anyway, dear listeners, without further ado, let's get into the show. Hello and welcome to the Reformed Gamers. But before we like to start off the show, a little bit of forget it. Derek, what have you been playing, man?
Oh man, I was on the edge of my seat. I was waiting for you.
I gave up.
All right, go ahead. All these people. All right, what have we been playing? Is that what we're going with?
Si, senor.
Gotcha. You were just like, forget it. What is it? What is it?
No,
Derek?
I was saying
what
like because I started going into it and I'm like, I just forget it. I'm just not even gonna bother trying to save myself anymore because I'm just gonna wind up losing it. Derek, what have you been playing, man?
I have been playing this little game called Rise of the Tomb Raider. I've been playing it on PC. I've been really enjoying it. I started playing it on the Xbox, and then I pretty much just drifted away from the Xbox altogether and never finished it. And so I got it on Steam here a while back, and I actually started playing it because I went to the theater and I watched the Tomb Raider movie. And after I got out of that movie, I got that itch. You know what I mean? Like, you know when you get that itch to go play a game you hadn't played or gonna play or whatever or something.
No, I thought you were gonna say you had the itch to go watch an actually good movie.
Hey, more on that later. It actually wasn't as bad to say as like an Assassin's Creed movie, for example. It was actually pretty decent. Like, it wasn't a great movie, but as far as like if translating a video game to movie form, it was actually pretty enjoyable. So
what do you think of Rise of the Tomb Raider then?
And so I'm loving it so far. It just looks great, plays great. But like I said, I'm playing at mouse and keyboard, which I don't do on too many adventure games, and so I'm just trying that out for just kind of I'm relatively newer at it. But yeah, I would probably say a quarter of the way through. I'm not too far into it. So,
okay.
But yeah, it's like and also with Shadow of the Tomb Raider coming out, I want to catch up, play through Rise. That way I can play through Shadow when it comes out later this year. Other than that, playing Rocket League, but Rocket League is one of those games that I'm pretty much always playing at some point.
Yeah.
I've put I think almost 200 hours on the PC. I've got almost 200 hours on PS4.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I've put in a little bit on the Switch, but it's really more there just kind of like whenever I'm just, bored and I want to play something for a few minutes, but yeah, I play the Rocket League usually just like at least just the ranked matches, like either doubles or solos, just because I just find that game so much fun, and it doesn't get old for me, which is real weird, but it's just that perfect arcadey game. And like, I love the game of soccer, and so it was soccer with sports, like basically RC cars. It's just a perfect game, at least from what my tastes are in those arcadey multiplayer experiences. And because I'm horrible at shooters themselves, and so this game, like, I'm still not great at Rocket League, but it's just one of those games I just can't put down. And so I usually have a friend or two that I'll play with, or I'll just play solos by myself. And so it's a ton of fun. So if if I'm not playing Rocket League, I usually get back around to it. It's my perfect go-to when I'm in between games. Or if I'm just like looking for something else to play alongside what I'm already doing. So like right now it's like Rise of the Tomb Raider. And if I'm not there, then I'm playing Rocket League.
Right on, man. Awesome. Jonathan, what about you, man?
So lately, over the past several weeks, I haven't really played anything new. I've been trying to spend less money on games these days, and I've been going back to a bunch of like awesome Switch indies like Graceful Explosion Machine and Celeste, Stardew Valley, Shovel Knight, a bunch of those. Another fun thing, those are all just phenomenal games. Another fun thing I've been doing lately is I've been playing Super Mario Odyssey with my 1-year-old son. He just kind of sits and
Nice.
watches me play, and he asks for it now. He'll run up to me and say, "Daddy, like Mario." So we'll go play Mario, and it's a lot of fun. The most recent big AAA game that I beat not too long ago was Assassin's Creed Origins.
Nice.
I didn't get it when it came out on the day of the second coming of video games on October 27th. I skipped Assassin's Creed Origins in lieu of Super Mario Odyssey, but finally picked it up early this year, which was, I think, a good thing because they'd patched in a bunch of stuff and it was real smooth. And that game is a ton of fun. If you love open world games, but you feel burned out by Assassin's Creed and are hesitant to get back in, I recommend ACO as a really good re-entry point. I hated Unity as much as the next guy. I think that's a bad game.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
But I can affirm that ACO is a great return to form. So a lot of similarities with Black Flag, which is my favorite entry. Same director, all that stuff. So a lot of the same vibe, but just the overworld is just the best they've ever done. It's incredible. So I recommend it.
That's
What do you think of
much fun with that game.
So, Derek, and I know you're an Assassin's Creed fan, like myself. What do you guys think of Bayek in terms of like where does he rank in the Assassin's Creed characters?
Outside of Ezio, I think he's one of the top for me.
Nice.
Because when it first started out, I wasn't too as far as into him and who he was, but the game did such a great job of fleshing him out as a character, and in the sense of him just being one, a family man, and two, just a guy with just a sense of loyalty. Just with him, as far as serving his people and serving the Pharaoh, all that kind of stuff, and he is. Just doesn't. I'd really come to respect him and really root for him as the game went on. Because at first he was just angry, and like I understood because he had for spoilers for anyone who hasn't played Assassin's Creed yet, he ends up losing his family and separated from his wife and all that kind of stuff. And so I got it, but I didn't really buy into it until as the game went on. So yeah, outside of Ezio, he's one of the most relatable assassins we've ever had.
Right on.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a different Assassin's Creed fan in that I wasn't really super into the series during like AC2 and like all the Ezio's games. I watched my roommate play them start to finish, so I'm very familiar with them, but I don't feel an attachment. I think Ezio was a great character, but I don't have that same maybe nostalgic attachment. So I actually really enjoyed Edward Kenway in Black Flag a lot. He made my favorite just for me in my personal experience.
Sure.
But he was more relatable in a Jack Sparrow way of like the guy's got a ton of issues and is pretty messed up and is out for his own pleasure, but like he's just funny and quippy and like you can see a good side of him, so you kind of like him, whatever. But Bayek, I agree that it's a little slow to start. He's a little dry and serious at the beginning and like, okay, this guy cares a little too much. But then as it goes, I think my favorite thing about him is, like Derek said, the whole family man thing. That really spoke to me, especially coming from a huge studio like Ubisoft. There's a point you reach in the game when you save this one town or city or village or something, and you bump into this lady who runs the local brothel, and she's like, "What you've done is super heroic. We're really grateful. Thank you. And so as a reward, you can have any one of my girls tonight for free. Like, have at it." And he was like, "Thank you, but I'm actually spoken for," and he walks away. And that theme continues throughout the game. People are asking him questions, and he's always referencing his wife, how much he loves her, how much she means to him, and all that stuff. And so that really, that reinforcing that strong marriage is something that I feel was all but lost in a lot of modern media, and to see it in ACO was huge. I really appreciated that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I probably hold that AC2 is still the best game in the franchise, but as far as at least and I'm talking about overall, but if we're talking about pure gameplay, I would say Origins is one of the strongest, if not the strongest game of the franchise.
Oh yeah,
nice.
I agree. They've nailed parkour, they've nailed combat, they've nailed everything. It's great.
Man. Well, that kind of leads into what I've been playing, because I was playing Assassin's Creed Origins. I've got about 13 hours in now, and but then this neat little indie game came out. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's really cool. It's very kind of unexpected. I don't even know if people have really even heard of it, but it's called God of War, and
God of War. Like, are we talking about like like Wonder Woman and like that whole
Well,
side
like,
of things.
You know, the thing is,
You
it's
know what's funny?
what's that?
Is that with absolutely no context, if you have no idea what God of War is, it does sound like a crappy iOS game. God of War.
Oh man,
And
it's funny because it's so true.
Yeah.
But and that's the thing about it is like a lot of people probably haven't even played the original series, which, dear listeners, I don't even recommend you play because they're not that great. I've played through them and I'm like, I
skipped them.
I don't see why they're that great. But this one, so here's the dealio. The past games were known for Kratos just being this loud, boisterous, angry dude that would just yell "Calliope" at almost every turn. You know, or he'd just be like, "Oh, I'm gonna, kill Zeus or whatever." He was just on this quest for revenge. But in this one, it's so different because it takes place years after the ending of the third game, and so you see Kratos with his son Atreus trying to basically be a dad, essentially trying to figure out the balance between being strict and being compassionate. And the way that they do that in the game is it's fascinating to watch because the two characters, Atreus and Kratos, they both push each other. Kratos pushes Atreus to kind of grow up a little bit, be more mature. And then Atreus pushes Kratos to kind of soften up a little bit and stop worrying about everything that could possibly go wrong. And so it's really cool. It's fun to watch them interact. The visuals for the game, gorgeous. Combat, great. Very, very refined. I like the more strategic approach to it. Not that it's not crazy and frenetic like the past games were, because it certainly is in its own right, but it's more manageable. It's fantastic. And being able to throw that axe and then call it back like Thor's Mjolnir from the movies.
It looks so cool.
Dude,
it looks so cool.
So there's this part in the game where you're riding a lift up on this mountain, and literally the entire way up, I was just throwing the axe, calling it back, throwing the axe, calling it back, throwing the axe, calling it back. And I showed my wife because she hasn't seen the game, really. I haven't shown her much of anything. So I was standing on the side of the mountain. I just threw the axe off the edge of the mountain. And she was just sitting there watching me. She watched me do that. And she's like, "Why'd you throw the axe?" I'm like, "Watch." Press triangle and the axe came back. She's like, "Okay, that's pretty cool." I'm like, "Yes, it is."
Can confirm. It is awesome.
It's so good. I mean, dear listeners, you guys will hear me talk more about the game, both in the Facebook group, on Twitter, and on the podcast. But the game is, I think all those 10s and 9s that you've seen on the internet, it's true. All of it.
That's a great box art quote. The game is yeah.
The game is ... yeah, TRG.
Yeah.
I am so sad that I will not be owning this game anytime soon. It looks and sounds unbelievable. It's going to be super hard to avoid spoilers for that long, but I'll manage.
Yeah, I already had part of the, like, luckily this wasn't like a huge spoiler. It was just kind of a nice little tease, but I've already had part of the game, or a section, or I guess just something in the game spoiled for me already. It's not anything I'm going to get upset over, but I'm just like, man, I really need to stay off the YouTube channels I follow that help me get platinum trophies and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
I've been on a semi-Twitch blackout because I've seen a couple of sections, but there hasn't been any crazy story stuff I've seen. I just want to pop in, like, for the bigger streamers, just kind of see where they're at and see how it looks. But I am at the same point. I'm like, all right, if you're playing God of War, like, good luck, because I'm not watching because I don't want to get spoiled on it.
Right.
And what I keep hearing on repeat is that, like, of all the games in the universe that you do not want spoiled for you, you do not want this game spoiled for you. That's what everyone keeps saying with, like, adamantly.
Which is interesting.
And I'm like, okay, I believe you. Like, okay, like so I'm trying to avoid it.
I haven't heard a game with that level of like, as far as discretion since, like, what, The Last of Us?
I think so.
Probably,
yeah.
Maybe Uncharted. If you were
Uncharted 4.
fan.
Yeah,
Uncharted 4.
Uncharted 4. I mean, yeah.
It's fantastic. I just and hearing that, like, saying like, "Oh, don't look at the trophy list because it'll reveal stuff." I'm like, well, now I just want to play the game even more. Like, so good. And anyway,
I was just gonna, one final quick thing. In a landscape of the constant rising of always online experiences, multiplayer stuff, and people were starting to get scared about single player experiences. I know we did have a reassurance already at the end of last year that single player experiences were still going strong, but this is just, well, in 2018 we already have just a what seems to be a trend setting game as a single player contained thing. It's just really encouraging. That makes me real happy.
Same here. Same here. Well, dear listeners, that section of TRG of episode 115 of the What Have You Been Playing has been brought to you by David Skinner, one of our newest dear VIPs over on patreon.com/The Reformed Gamers. If you like what we do here on the show, head on over to patreon.com/The Reformed Gamers. Pledge your support there to get sweet perks such as early and uncut access to all of our episodes. Things like entry into our monthly game giveaway, private updates on the show, the website, things that we're doing, and even access to our patron exclusive show, The Loot Box, where me and Adam get together for about 15 minutes, talk about a random topic, and have fun. But moving on with the show here, we're going to kind of run through this, guys, if we can, real quick, just to kind of stay on time. We're going to go into What Have You Been Reading, also brought to you by Dear VIP Gareth Evans over on patreon.com/The Reformed Gamers. Jonathan, man, what have you been reading?
Well, what I've been reading is a little book that was recommended to me by none other than Mr. Logan Sharp himself.
Oh, so you read My Little Pony Horse Adventure?
Yes.
Fantastic book. Pony. It'll punch you in the feels.
I already burned it. No, I'm reading Mistborn, which is a fantasy novel if you're into that kind of thing, and I enjoy that stuff. The thing about Mistborn is I'm maybe a quarter of the way through it, and I have yet to. I'm like unable to slot it into like a genre of fantasy. You know, you have you have your dragons and witches and magic fantasy, and then you have your maybe more modern fantasy, or you have your superhero fantasy. You have different types of fantasy. This is like none of those and all of those. It's very interesting. I think if I had to pick one, like a big name, it would probably fall into the category of a superhero. But throw everything you think of when you hear the word superhero, like Marvel and DC, like out the window. It's totally unique, which I figured was impossible. I thought we'd done to death that whole idea, but like, I can't describe how unique this book is. If you're maybe looking, and I'll say quickly, it's not new. It's not some brand new book. It's not old, but it's not like a last year kind of thing. But it's, I think, early 2000s is when it came out. So it's
I think somewhere around that. Yeah, that sounds right.
So if you haven't picked that book up yet, if you're into a good fantasy novel, I can already recommend it, and I'm not even done with it. And if I hear Logan say it, which I have frequently now, he'll tell you that it hasn't even gotten good yet, and I already love it. So,
are you still at that same spot that you were last week when you mentioned this?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Oh, dude, you don't even know. You don't even know.
I know.
The stuff that you're going to get into is insane.
I'm already floored. And it's like the whole God of War thing, I guess. When people are like 3 hours in, they're like, "Oh, this is amazing," and everyone else is like, "You have no idea." I hear that a lot. So just the same thing Logan's been saying with Mistborn. Like, I'm already floored. Like, whoa, these are really cool new ideas, and this writing is phenomenal. And I'm being told that it's not even scratching the surface. So I'm excited. I need to get back to that book. Man.
Oh, yes, you do. Take your time with it, but hurry up.
Is Mistborn like the first of the series, or is it a sequel?
It's the first of 3 books.
Well,
yeah, it's the first.
Yeah, it's the first of that trilogy. There's a new trilogy that the author came out with that takes place, I don't remember how many years after the first trilogy. But yeah.
I got some Audible credits I need to redeem, so I might have to
jump
into that.
Well, and I actually listened in and heard a few minutes of the Audible, and it sounded real good. Like, the guy reading it is awesome sounding, I guess. Mm-hmm. He's very engaging, and like the author of that book is phenomenal at like world building. I feel like I know all the characters by name. I know where we are in the story. I have a map in my head like seared in, and it's not like they try too hard. It's done very, very subversively and very behind the scenes, but he's a very good world builder. It's very engaging. I love it.
Okay.
Yeah, man. It's good stuff. Derek, man, what you been reading?
I have been working on a little book for a class I'm taking at seminary. I've got a book review due here like a week or so. It's a book from our hermeneutics class. It's called Misreading Scripture with Western Eyes, Removing Cultural Blinders to Better Understand the Bible by Randy Richards and Brandon O'Brien. And it's a pretty solid little book. It just addresses issues that a lot of Western readers, primarily like in North America, that we bring to scripture in how we interpret it, just because of the culture that we live in and things that we misunderstand, like when we were trying to read scripture within its original context. And so we'll just take scripture and we'll completely twist it around. Not that we're intending to, but just because we don't understand, what, as far as like your first century, Middle Eastern, as far as type of culture would look like. And so he does a great job of addressing those issues. I'm about halfway through, and he does he does a great job just from talking about a lot of different concepts, just like individualistic cultures, like let's say a North America versus a collectivistic culture, like let's say Japan, to where, as far as a Japanese family, if the adult, like the father, makes a decision, it affects the entire family in such a drastic way, to where, in a North American culture, you've got, the dad will make a decision. It'll affect the family as a whole, but ultimately every person in that family is still seen as individuals. And so to where it's not like a tribe or a family or like a unit that functions together in everything they do. And so it's a very interesting concept, and it's very eye-opening. And I had known of some of the things that he talked about, but he just opens it on a completely different level. He was a missionary. One of the authors, I think it was Randy, that was a missionary to Indonesia. And one of the things he mentioned was talking about how he was teaching a class, and he had a multiple choice test, and there were several students that didn't answer certain questions. Like they would turn in a multiple choice test blank, which seems odd to us. And then he goes on and says, "Hey, why didn't you circle into the answers?" He's like, "Well, I didn't know it. I didn't know the answer." And he goes, "Well, you could have at least guessed." And he goes, "Well," I'm like, that would have implied that if I would have accidentally gotten it right, that would have implied that I knew the right answer, and that would be lying. And I was like, oh man, like, and so it was like, and he almost started arguing with the student, but then he realized what it was. And so it's just those kind of like cultural differences of just kind of helping us to understand, how cultures view certain things. And he relates that back to scripture, and he goes further into that. So that's been a good book. Definitely, as far as, if you're looking for something, I won't put it down as my reco, but if you're looking for something like that, you can definitely go pick it up. If you want my book review, if there's anyone in the TRG group that wants to read just kind of a quick 2-pager of what I think of the book, let me know, and I'll definitely send it your way. Outside of that, I'm in the comic book world right now. I've been reading Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6. It's of the
dude.
Yes, and I stepped away from comics for a little while, and then the current writer Dan Slott, he's stepping down after years and years and years and years.
I say he's been writing that for over it hasn't been quite a decade yet, has it?
Yeah, no, it's I don't know. Brand New Day, he jumped on after Brand New Day, which was I think actually 2008. So actually I think it is close to 10 years.
Golly,
so yeah, I could be wrong, but it's close. But anyway, he's stepping down. And so there's this big giant event where it's basically closing of a big giant chapter in the Spider-Man universe, and Spider-Man outside of Batman's my absolute favorite comic book character. And so I picked it back up. I'm a couple of volumes behind, and so currently working on it. I read it digitally mostly just because it's so hard to keep up with physical books just with my lifestyle. Just because I'm always on the road, and so it's nice to have it on my iPad or my phone. So it's a lot of fun. If you're looking, I always recommend Spider-Man comic books if you're a fan, especially just with the game coming out. We got Infinity War. It's just a good time to be alive for Spider-Man fans, and so I've just been back in that world. So yeah.
Side note, I am so pumped for Infinity War, and what's even better is my wife is super pumped too, so that makes it even more fun. So dude, I can't wait for that movie, dude.
There you go. I can't either, man. I'm gonna hopefully go and see. Oh man, I just realized that the week this episode releases is the week that movie comes out.
Yeah, that movie comes out on our 5-year anniversary.
There you go.
We're gonna go see it.
Perfect.
There you go.
Fantastic.
Do it.
Pumped.
Just do it. Oh man, well, dear listeners, real quick, as far as what I've been reading, it's not so much what I've been reading, but I attended Secret Church this past weekend, which is for those of you that don't know what it is, it's this yearly event that David Platt puts on where from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m., I mean, there's some breaks in there, but from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. One night out of the year, They get together, they talk about a specific topic, and they go through the Bible and what it says about these different topics. This year was cults and counterfeit gospels. So he went over things like the prosperity gospel, theological liberalism, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and things like that. It was deep,
Wow.
but dude, it was so good. Such good information, man. A lot of stuff that, this is stuff that I've been talking with my students about for really ever since I got here. They haven't shied away from asking questions about Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, and all that stuff. And, thankfully, because of seminary and me reading just a lot of books and watching a lot of apologias, evangelism to Mormons videos, I've been able to talk with them and kind of hang out with them and expand on that and help them understand some of these concepts. And so some of my students even went to Secret Church, and it was just great. Really great stuff. I could see that a lot of my students were just really loving it, really digging, just learning about these different belief systems, I guess. But the one thing that kind of hit me hard is when David Platt started talking about the prosperity gospel. Not that my church affirms that or teaches that. They most certainly do not. But you realize how much, when David was kind of breaking it down, you realize how much of a prosperity gospel is steeped in materialism, which is interwoven in American culture. And I'm like, dude, it hit me so hard that I'm like, I don't teach the prosperity. Like, I came to this realization, like, I don't teach the prosperity gospel. I don't affirm it. But some of the ways that I live and some of the ways that I spend my money can affirm that. And I'm like, crap, because he just straight up asked,
That's heavy stuff.
He just straight up asked, what are you spending your money just to get more stuff, or are you using your money to glorify God? And he kind of broke that down more. Dear listeners, you should go look it up on radical.net. I'll have it in the show notes. But it hit hard, man. And it got me to really just kind of consider and think about what I spend my money on, how I spend my money, and just kind of got me thinking of how I can use the money that God allows me to have differently to bless others, to preach the gospel to others, and to even help others go and share the gospel. And so it was just really a fantastic thing. Dear listeners, I highly recommend you go check it out. He talks really, really fast, so you got to listen quickly, but it's well worth it. So radical.net. I don't know if they have all the stuff up just yet, but you can go check out their other secret churches that they've done in years past. He's done 18 of these so far, so there's at least 17 streams that you can go watch and get caught up on and see for yourself. He's covered a lot of different topics, but fantastic stuff. So quickly moving along into the topic here, dear listeners, brought to you by Dear VIP Eric Bryant over on patreon.com/thereformedgamers. He suggested to us several months ago when we were asking some of our dear patrons, what are some topics that we could talk about on the show, trying to get a feel for the show and just trying to get some ideas. And he posited this one idea of asking, is it a sin to do evil in games? And that kind of got me thinking, like, let's go even more broad with it and try to figure out how we can enjoy games to the glory of God. And so I put that question out in the Facebook group and on Twitter, and of course on Patreon, and pretty much only all of our patrons responded. But hey, dear listeners, you can respond to. It's okay. It's okay. You don't have to spend money to give us ideas. That was awkward. I'm sorry. But anyway, so one of the questions we got, we're just going to jump right into it. One of the questions we got comes from Josh Broccolo, my dude. And he asked, good old Josh of the So Talk to Me podcast. He asked, are there specific guidelines that each of you guys follow that you can't cross when determining whether or not you can play a game or series? For example, scenes of upper body female nudity, depictions of God in a blasphemous way, or extreme graphic violence, etc. What are some ways you guys go about choosing the games that you play? I'm going to say, first off, because I noticed this when he mentioned it, the depictions of God in a blasphemous way, there's this game put out by P-Cube Entertainment called Battle of Gods or something like that, where they actually have, it's a fighting game where you play as the different gods of the world religions, and you actually play as Jesus, and it is so irreverent and so disrespectful that as soon as I saw the trailer, I'm like, I will never buy a game put out by the studio ever, because I don't get down with that. I don't care if you make fun of Buddha. I don't care if you make fun of all these other world religions, but because they're false gods, they're not real, but you make fun of Jesus like that, it's like, nah, you're done. I'm done with you. So anyway, getting off my soapbox before I get a little too heated. What about you guys, Jonathan, man? Are there any guidelines you use? I guess I should say biblical guidelines that you use to help you decide what game to play?
Well, so I think it does depend on, there's a list of things that different sins that I think could be affecting you in different ways, and you should approach them differently. For example, you might not want to kill someone in a video game because that is the glorification of killing another human being, but you're not actually killing someone when you do that. However, if you go and have a sexual encounter in a video game, yes, you're not having that sexual encounter, but the Bible specifies that even looking with lust is sexual sin. And so that is committing that sin in reality, whereas killing a 3D model in a video game is not killing in reality, or even hatred, really. So there's different levels in how that is manifested. It's the same thing like in a movie. If I play a scene in a movie where I rob a bank, I didn't really rob that bank. It was set up, so I didn't commit a sin. If I play a scene in a movie where I make out with a girl, well, I actually made out with that girl. It's totally different. So like there's differences there. But for me, it's violence. I split it into two categories. There's like unnecessary, needless violence that glorifies the maiming of someone made in the image of God. And then there is violence that men are called to, which is in defense of their families or even their countries, and that can be a good and right thing for a man to stop other men through means of violence when no other option is available to them. Things like war, as long as it's not war for the wrong reasons, all that stuff. And war does get very muddled, very political, very messy. So I'm not giving the blanket okay for that, but
sure.
Games like, I think we talked about last time, you mentioned Mortal Kombat, Logan. This needless, unnecessary, disgusting, gross, up close and personal destruction of the human body for just like pleasure. I personally don't agree with that.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what when I brought that up last time, and I follow very much in the same line as you. Is like, I read this book by, is it Kevin Schultz? I think it's Kevin Schultz, called "Of Games of God," where he talks about that same thing. Where when it comes to violence in games, is it like an exhortation? Like, is it showing kind of how? Is it showing the gravity of the situation? Is it depicting war and just kind of what the people were going through, like Battlefield 1 does? Or is it exploitative, where it's just doing it for shock value, like Mortal Kombat often does, just to gross people out? Because he would say that games that have exploitive type of violence, Christians probably honestly shouldn't really mess with, because it just serves no purpose. It's there to glorify violence, essentially, is what it is. Whereas some games, like Battlefield 1, you see the effect that war takes on the characters. And so you understand that this kind of violence does have effects on people. And it just serves a greater purpose than just, trying to get a certain amount of kills on a leaderboard. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I would echo with that. Derek, what about you, man, when it comes to violence?
Yeah, I definitely agree with y'all. For me personally, a big one, at least on the surface across the board, that is always a big no for me, is if the game has nudity in it. Like, I have to really do a lot of research in it before I play it, because if it's something that's unavoidable, if there is points where like nudity is unavoidable in the game, like I can't bring myself to play it. It's why I haven't played The Witcher 3, and people give me a really hard time about it. It's like, oh my gosh, like you love open world RPGs, you would love this game, and I'm like, I bet I would, but I mean, I just can't. And just because lust is a sin that that I've struggled with for a lot of my life, and it just even is something that to where we have like I have like something like called Covenant Eyes, which is like a accountability web browser that my wife has access to, and it's a great program. And so on things like that, for the sake of accountability and honoring my wife, and also honoring God, that I want to avoid. Now, if it's something that where it's like a side thing where I can avoid it, I'm a lot more comfortable with playing it, just because I could say, okay, like as long as I'm avoiding like these like side mission quests or something, or like if the cutscenes are like skippable or something of that sort, to where I can get past it. That's a big thing for me. Outside of that, it's really kind of a case by case basis. There's a friend of mine named Matt Millsap. he wrote a dissertation on how just the gospel and video games coincide. And one of the things he's talked with me about on several occasions is like, what are the redeemable qualities in a game? Like for me, when I ask myself that question, I don't have any interest in playing a game like Payday 2. Because that game is about robbing banks, like nothing but robbing banks, and it's violence, and you're stealing, and that's where like that's advertised as the fun, like, oh, you get to work together with friends and rob a bank. And I'm like, I don't really like that. It's not really something that has any redeemable qualities in the sense of how that a Christian should live their life. And like to where if you play a game like to where I would argue like The Last of Us, it is a reminder of like the depravity of man, and you see where they make mistakes and how they had repercussions of that, to where the whole point of a game like Payday 2 is to successfully rob a bank, and
it's to be a successful criminal.
be a successful criminal. And so that's just where I kind of draw that line, and it's like I said, it goes back to that case by case basis. But across the board, I don't see too many of those types of games that kind of like, okay, no. And like, for example, that fighting game, I forgot what it was called that you mentioned. But like stuff like
Mortal
that.
Kombat?
What?
Mortal Kombat? It's an indie game.
It's only been around a couple of years.
I'm just kidding.
It was that fighting game where
Fight of Gods.
Yeah. And so like that one, I'm like,
I've
got Johnson's like, oh, okay.
I was like, you don't know Mortal Kombat?
That's not what I was talking about, Jonathan. Yeah,
dude, he grew up in a Christian home. There's no video games. It's just, I don't know. I thought that would be more funny than what I thought it sounded funnier. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm derailing things.
No, that's fine. But yeah, that's generally nudity is the one that I have to address a lot. I'm not too big into horror games as other people, and like I said, that's a really more personal preference. To me, it's like especially when it's like super demonic. Like I just don't like. I'll watch other people play it, like Resident Evil 7. Like I'll watch people play it, but I don't really have a desire to go out and play stuff like that. That's more of a personal taste. But like, I just don't like the whole demonic side of things. It gets a little dark. And
that's interesting that you brought that up, because for the longest time I've picked up the remastered Darksider games that came out over the past few years, and I remember playing those on the Xbox 360 and thinking like, dude, this is great. It's like a more mature comic book version of Legend of Zelda. I'm totally into that. But just like over the past few years, I can't play those games anymore, man. Like I tried playing the first one, and when I realized that you're using souls as currency and you are meeting with a demon to trade those souls in to upgrade your character, I'm like, dude, I don't feel comfortable playing this anymore. Like, like that's just, I don't know. There's just something wrong with it.
It starts affecting you in a certain way when you have a certain perspective on it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the important things too. That when it comes to this is one of those things where you got to, if your conscience, like if the Holy Spirit is pushing your conscience on something, you got to listen to that, man, because you can't, because I've tried to ignore it before, and it just keeps getting that push from the Holy Spirit just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can't really ignore it. I mean, you can sear your conscience, and their scripture does talk about having a seared conscience, but man, I don't know. I feel like I'm jumping the gun a little bit. So let me go back and say a few things about this part here. Dear listeners, don't hear us say that if you play a game like Grand Theft Auto, Payday, Mortal Kombat, or whatever, that you're in sin, or we don't think you're a Christian, or that we're judging you. We're not saying that at all. So please don't take it that way, and don't take it personally. This is just us and kind of where we're coming from. But it's just, at least when it comes to those games, I would encourage you to think a little bit more about why you're playing them, what you enjoy about them, and then kind of go from there. But at the same time, if you're playing something that the Holy Spirit's pushing you on, you might want to take a step back, pray about it for a little bit, and see kind of what's going on. Because, I mean, true story, this is going back to when we were talking about nudity. We actually did an episode talking about nudity from a biblical worldview, and kind of how me and OG Jonathan, that started the TRG with me, kind of how we approach that in video games. And ultimately, I deleted the episode because I felt that we were, or at least I felt I was misleading people, and I wasn't being biblical. So I took it out of there not to lead people, so I wouldn't lead people astray. Because I've changed a lot on it. I used to think that nudity in games was okay. Like it's like whatever. But then the more I thought about it, the more I studied the Bible. Derek, you hit it on the head, dude. In order to honor God and in order to honor our wives, I can't play those. I can't play those games in it,
Mhm.
you know. Now, if
Yeah.
it's avoidable, and that's the thing where I'm even more convicted on is I'm thinking of the verse and I forget where it is. It's either Proverbs or Psalms, but it talks about holding fire against your chest. Like, how long can you hold fire against your chest before you get burned? Something to that effect.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, I shouldn't even mess with this, to be honest. I mean, especially since, you know, I struggle with lust. You know, that's a thing.
Mhm.
It's something I've had to be very intentional about, and I've had to have my wife just kind of stay on me about, like, you know, hey, here's the game I'm playing, you know, check it out. If you feel uncomfortable with any part of it, let me know, and I won't play it, you know.
You know,
But
there's a. Sorry, I didn't cut you off.
no, man, go for it.
Lust is a topic that my community group, that my church community group and I talk about on a fairly regular basis because it's a fairly regular struggle for all of us that we have to keep each other accountable for. And one of the things that one of the guys in my group brought up a couple of weeks ago is he said, I've been looking at the way the Bible talks about different types of sin, the way it tells you how to deal with sin. And there's a lot about, do not sin in your anger. Like, it's okay to feel anger. Just make sure when you feel angry, you don't sin, like pray about it, whatever. And there's different ways to deal with different types of sin.
Yeah.
But almost across the board, every major example I can think of is when it brings up sexual sin and lust, the verbiage is flee. It's always just run away.
Yeah, like Joseph
nudity
did
comes
in Genesis.
Yeah, like nudity. Yeah, when nudity comes up in a video game, the proper response, as far as my personal conviction, is to stop playing the video game and leave, like go away and do something else, or pray, or talk to a friend, or read a book, or whatever. Like in 1 Corinthians 10:13, when it talks about God giving you a way of escape, I mean, he says, I will give you a way of escape, which means you need to get out of there.
Yeah.
Joseph in Genesis running so desperately that he tore his coat. I mean, he wasn't just like, I'm going to get out of here, I'll see you later. He was like tearing his way out of there.
Yeah, he wasn't taking a stroll.
His attitude was like, get away. And then even in I think 1st or 2nd Timothy, where it says, flee youthful lust. Like, don't, like, it's not time to pause the game and fold your hands and pray. Like, leave, like, get out. And so that's the attitude that the Bible has about just having a desperation of like getting away from anything that would cause you to lust.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would even, just to kind of wrap this up so we can get to a couple of other questions, I would even just say beyond just even nudity, if there's something that you play that just can tempt you to a specific sin where it's, you're getting too angry, or you're lashing out, or you're just in a foul mood, or anything really, because a lot of those things can lead to you just lashing out at people and hurting other people. That's why I try to not play fighting games anymore, or at least not online, so I don't get super competitive, because they make me real angry. I get real competitive, and then I wind up being mean to other people. It's just one of those things where you gotta, one, know yourself and know your weaknesses, but also just not put a stumbling block before you, is what I would say to that. But those are our guidelines, and we can talk more about that off air with any of the dear listeners that are curious. But moving on to another question. This kind of ties into this other one here by Jesse Pinu? Dude, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your last name. How do you deal with... It's funny that Christians is in parentheses. Or
quotes, rather.
Quotations. How do you deal with Christians that use profanity? They are not glorifying God with their speech. I'm gonna just broaden this sucker out and just ask you guys: how do you deal with just people that use profanity? Period. Because no matter what, if you're being a jerk online, you're not glorifying God at all. You're being a punk. So those guys that I was playing Halo with a couple months ago. Yo, if you want me to get good at the game, give me some advice. Don't sit there and tell me I suck at the game. Don't sit there and be like, dude, what are you doing? You're terrible. Come on. How are you going to build me up? You got to build me up. All right, anyway, that's enough of a goofy rant. Guys, what do you think, man? When it comes to you playing games with other people, how do you guys deal with language? Do you just mute them? Do you ask them to stop? What do you guys do?
I honestly, whether this is the correct response or not, I just ignore it. honestly. And
Sure.
some people, honestly, over time, especially if they find out what I do, or they found out like what my lifestyle is, in the sense of just I'm a follower of Jesus. I do my best, to have a clean speech and honoring God with everything I do. And people that swear up a storm, even just like on their own Twitch stream or something. But if I'm in a party chat with them, they all of a sudden stop swearing. And ultimately it's because like I exist among them, but I'm not conformed to what they do. And this is that whole like
Sure.
Romans 12, 1 and 2, to where, I just want to be a light. I want to be an example. I want to, say, hey, look, like you don't have to use this language to get your point across. And we've had some discussions, like they'll be like, hey, like, do you swear? Like, why don't you swear? Do you have like, do you just use sub words? And like, we'll have, honest conversations about it. I talk about how it just seems like, the language is unnecessary and there's other ways around it. And, to where swearing, like, for me, it just kind of spikes up anger, and at least it like within myself, if I have if I've used that in the past, and because I have for sure, like I've had those experiences, and it never gets me anywhere. It never really helps in where I talk about the Bible and what it says, and how I just want to honor God with everything I do, and so that's why I do it. And they ultimately and I've been blessed to just for those people to respect it, and just for them to be like, hey, like hey, like I get it, like I'm not that way, but I respect it. And so it's been nice just kind of have to where just to see where they take notice, and they at least respect me enough to, when I'm around, not to do it. So just guess to answer the question, how do I deal with it? I don't like, I make it a point that they know, but I'm not like, hey, why are you swearing? Blah. Like I'm, not
Right.
like I'm not getting on a high horse by any means, but I'm letting them notice just by my actions that I don't. And usually those conversations start on their own.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I may be not the greatest person to ask about this because I do almost no online gaming at all. I never really have. That's never really been my thing, but I do it even less than ever before. But in the instances where I ran into that, usually they weren't believers. But if they were, that's not something that is like heaven or hell kind of thing in my mind. Like I believe you can believe in Jesus Christ and still struggle with that. Like, so, next time I see a guy do any level of sin, I'm not going to jump and tackle him, be like, hey, cut it out, And so the same applies to profanity. I don't think we're called to tackle anyone and just start, maybe not even like direct message and like, hey, man, I heard
combat. What did you get over here?
Yeah, I heard you swearing, and let me show you these 8 verses about that. And what's wrong with you? Whatever. But like, maybe like if you feel like you built a relationship with them, you can lovingly say like, hey, I'd love to have I hear you like swearing and cussing a lot. Tell me about that. Like, clearly you're cool with it. Like, how did you come to that conclusion? I'd love to know.
Yeah.
And come from a place of learning rather than a place of teaching at the beginning. Instead of being like, hey, what you're doing is wrong. Here's what you need to be doing instead. Ask questions, learn about them, build that relationship. Because if you just hop in, tell them the truth, even if it is true, and then pop out, no love has been exemplified there. And so the other end of the spectrum is, oh man, it's all love, and let's not judge anyone. Let's not tell anyone.
Peace,
that's not the answer either.
Yeah.
Man. Love without truth is not love at all. Yeah. And so, there is a middle ground.
Getting it.
That'll preach.
There is a middle ground. Yeah, I would just say, man, if you're willing to call someone out on their profanity, which I understand, you need to be willing to build a relationship and love that person well and ask questions and learn where they're coming from.
Yeah. I would even add, I'm gonna broaden this up a little bit. I'm gonna do some pushback on here. I'm gonna say to stop focusing so much on a list of words that our culture considers taboo and look at the entire content of what someone's saying. Because going back to my Halo example, when I played with people online, they were cussing for sure, being punks. But they were also saying, you're terrible at this game. What are you doing? Why are you so bad at this game? Why can't you use the weapons that you have? Just constantly tearing me down. And it's like, dude, if you want me to be good at this game, give me some pointers. Give me some tips. Give me some advice. I'm open to listening, man. If I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, let me know. Be like, hey, dude, it looks like you're not that great with a sniper rifle. Try using the battle rifle to get used to that first. And if that doesn't work out, stick to pistols or something like that. It's all this idea. This is one of the things that kind of frustrates me a little bit within Christian circles is we focus so much on a list of words that we shouldn't say or we think we shouldn't say, but we don't take the time to step out and look at the entire content of what's being said. Now, I'm not sitting here, I'm not going to affirm Christians' use of cuss words or anything like that. But what I want to challenge on is the entire content of the message. Because I've sat in groups in Xbox Live party chats with some of my students where they're not cussing, but what they're saying ain't wholesome either. And it ain't something that should be coming out of a Christian's mouth. It ain't something that should be coming out of someone who's been redeemed by the blood of Christ. And so I've usually told them, or kind of, I'll be sitting there listening, and I'll stop and be like, guys, what are you doing? And they'll usually kind of stop and think about it and be like, oh, we're sorry. I'm like, you guys know better. Just, chill out. It's just a game. You don't need to be calling so-and-so names. You don't need to be tearing them down, it's just a game. Calm down, chill out, throw some perm on your attitude, as Bruno Mars would say. But that's the thing too, is like, I can do that because I'm their youth pastor. But at the same time, Jonathan, you hit it on the head, man. You got to ask questions, because your friends might be going through a tough time where they're redeemed by the blood of Christ. Their cussing doesn't negate that, but they might be going through something, and they might need you to minister to them in that time, to love on them a little bit, to help them out, because that's what I've noticed.
That's where Paul talks about, taking every thought captive, and we live in a culture that doesn't encourage that at all. And that's just where part of the problem comes from, is that we just kind of, we're encouraged to just kind of act freely and do whatever it is that, that our heart desires, instead of saying, hey, like, we need to truly take every single thought we have captive, just so that, truly pay attention to what it is we're doing, what it is we're saying, how is it that it's received by others, that, are we causing another brother to stumble because of our actions, so on and so forth. And it's, we're saying that example is so hard because a lot of times people don't even notice it because they're not paying that much attention in the first place.
Yeah.
I would just say a great reference would be in Romans 14, where Paul talks about that a lot, of like, hey, like, let every man be persuaded, and like, let's not try to cause another brother to stumble, but also call another brother out for stuff that like may not be a conviction of theirs. And just, there's a balance to be had here. And it doesn't mean it's not antinomianism. We can all do whatever we want and we're fine. But, you have to be careful. I think, like you said, Logan, not having a list in your head that every time you hear a word, it's like, oh, I gotta go knock him down and like let him know. And it can get on the legalistic side.
Yeah.
And I would also say, just on that note, I've been reading in Colossians 2, where it says, just in verse 20, it says, if with Christ you died to the elemental spirits of the world, why, as if you were still alive in the world, do you submit to regulations? Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. And he says, these have indeed the appearance of wisdom in promoting self-made religion and asceticism and severity to the body, but they are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. And so, like, just referring to building up this set of rules so high that we have this rigid structure that isn't, based on scripture and being loving towards one another and understanding.
Yeah, man. And I would even end it with this, because you guys keep bringing up scripture in here, and I'm like saying stuff that I know from different Bible passages, but I'm not like directly quoting any of them, such as like wholesome speech. But I would even say this: Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. It's all about how you go about it. You can lovingly restore someone to Christ, pulling them out of their, and this is going a little bit of a different direction than what I thought it would. But it's, if a brother's in sin and they're doing stuff, pray for them, lovingly return them back to fellowship. It's just straight out of 1 John 5:16 through 18, I believe. Maybe it's James 5:14 through 20. I have to double check. I just preached on this a couple weeks ago. All right, so one final question here, because we are quickly running out of time there. And maybe we can answer this one quickly. If not, we can table it for later. But this question comes from Luke Strain. It says, how can playing a single-player game alone glorify God if you are not witnessing to anyone, building relationships with anyone, or growing closer to Him? Derek, what do you got?
Good question. So especially since I'm a single-player connoisseur, much like Jonathan. And as far as like, if you're not, let's say, interacting with other people, I honestly would argue that it is it's a very mentally challenging thing to go through as far as a single player experience. Because I will say something like, we talked about The Last of Us earlier, for example. Just getting able to reflect on things such as what is going on in the game, how is it that you are, responding to what's happening, to where, like, it's such a dark game. Like The Last of Us is a very dark game, very trying thing, very emotional experience. But the experience itself, it is something to where we talk about, like seeing, like me personally seeing in that, talking about the depravity of man and sin and like the consequences and the how that has wreaked havoc in other people's relationships. And so it is more of a reflecting thing, but also the single player experience is for me also something to where I can also rest, because we talk about talking about the Sabbath, talking about how we have that day of rest. Single player experiences are, like, for me on that day of rest it's so soothing, because as I am in ministry and I'm a class A overthinker, like I overthink so much just about when it comes to ministry, when it comes to my marriage, when it comes to, or like I'm always thinking 24/7 about stuff, and to the point where it just stresses me out. And Logan, I think you're similar to I am in that regard. And you can confirm or deny, depending on if I'm right or wrong. But and so for that single player experience, and like I'm not talking about the point of escapism, to where like the single player experience is helping me escape from my responsibilities or anything like that, but just that experience alone, just helping me reflect on that and helping me keep my mind off things, to where on that day of rest, to where I need to trust God and stop playing God. And say, okay, like I'm going to take this day of rest. I'm going to unplug from what I'm doing. I'm going to put my phone away. Like I'm just going to play this game, play this single player experience, and just enjoy it. To where that has helped me on the Sabbath, on my day of rest, just to just completely unplug from my responsibilities. Because if you are in ministry, or whether you're in ministry or not, you can understand those responsibilities are a week-long process. It's just not something you clock out of at 5:00 and go home and not worry about it. It's something that's, you're constantly getting phone calls, text messages, you're trying to plan ahead when it comes to camps or events. And so it's something that's always on my mind, for sure. And so that's how I take it as glorifying God, at least in my own experience. And I don't see anything outside of, that's in scripture that would say otherwise, until it then becomes, an idolization, to where like those games are God, like that take place of God. So that is, I hope that makes sense, but that's where I would take that conversation.
Yeah, that's kind of how I play single player games, is that idea that, I'm the kind of person, I'm a lot like my dad, where I have to be doing something at all times. And if I'm not doing something, I'm restless, because I know something's coming. And so if I play just a single player game, really any game, period, it allows me to get in that mindset of, okay, I'm enjoying something that God has allowed me to enjoy. It's getting my mind off of something that I need to stop worrying about, and come to the conclusion that God's still working even when I'm taking a rest, and that's okay. And it kind of goes back to, maybe we need to do an episode on how to build a theology of leisure and entertainment. But I mean, it just kind of goes back to that, because you could really say the same thing of, well, how are you glorifying God when you're mowing the yard? How are you glorifying God in watching a movie for 2 hours? You can kind of take it to all that stuff. But it goes back to that. I think one of you guys maybe mentioned this. Maybe this was on a different question. But just this idea of taking every thought captive for Christ is something I use every time I watch a TV show, a movie, play a game. Is like, okay, everything has a worldview. So how does this line up with my Christian worldview? How are the characters reacting to certain situations? What are they saying? Is this how we as Christians should react? One of the things I love about playing Legend of Zelda is that everywhere, it seems like every single thing in that game points back to God without it ever meaning to do so. I mean, especially when you play Ocarina of Time, you have the three goddesses, and I'm like, yo, what about the Trinity? How does this line up with that? Does that line up with that doctrine? Where'd they get that from? And maybe that's like a really like nerdy Christian way of playing games, or
somebody's read Zelda in theology.
maybe a little bit. Yeah. Great book. But that's the thing, is I think you can grow closer to God while playing a game, watching a movie. It all depends on how you approach doing it, Are you approaching it with Thanksgiving, and at the same time you're trying to redeem that time that you're spending with the game or movie or whatever by bringing it back to the Christian worldview and going, I don't know if I would do that. This doesn't Christian. The Bible says we shouldn't do this, so I don't know if I really agree with the character doing this. The means do not justify the end, that kind of thing, or the ends don't justify the means. Hopefully that gives some good food for thought. Jonathan, I'm going to let you talk, man, and get you in on this.
So I have to jump on the Zelda rabbit trail for just a second. I think when I agree that the parallels are everywhere. Yeah, you said Zelda, man. It's all over.
Surprise! It's like
I haven't
Zelda 3 times. Jonathan appears.
Yeah, seriously. I haven't read that book that you're all talking about, the Zelda and God or whatever that is.
Oh, really?
Zelda Theology, and I have not read that. I feel like I should. But I think my favorite parallel that just jumped out at me all of a sudden, and I think it was because we were talking about this on a previous podcast I was on, in Breath of the Wild, when Zelda is called to look to the power of the goddesses to defeat evil, which would be Christians being called to rely on God's power and not the power within us, but relying on God. So her father tells her, you need to rely on the power of the goddess to defeat this evil and not your own whatever. She says, I've tried, forget that. I'm going to go my own way, and I'm going to raise an army of guardians to take out the evil. And so she goes her own path, raises this huge army. Ganon pops out, takes it all over, and turns her idea against her and destroys her and everyone she loves. Yeah. And so that idea backfires of not going, with the power of the goddesses or whatever. And at the end, spoiler alert, she returns to the power of the goddesses and is able to defeat him thoroughly that way. But I love that. I love that parallel, even though obviously, again, totally unintentional. It was super, super cool for me to see.
Yeah. Just goes to show what happens when we rely on our own power and technology, instead of God. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
But to answer the main question, how can a single player game alone glorify God if you're not witnessing, building relationships, growing closer to Him, whatever? A couple things. First of all, I would say, rest is built into, rest is a part of creation. It's hard coded in from the beginning. I would start with the most obvious question, how do you glorify God when you're asleep?
Ooh.
Sleeping, the only thing that sleeping helps is you, period. No one else has benefited from you sleeping. However, you could actually say that's not true at all, because when you sleep, you are then rested and more prepared to go and bless others. So then you could say that by you sleeping, you are blessing others more than you will if you don't sleep. Because if you don't sleep, eventually you're going to crash. Yeah. And so you can then extrapolate that out to other forms of recreation. And I would say one thing I'd want to put a stop to is by setting video games as a category to themselves, apart from things like playing football or watching a movie or reading a book. I feel like those are all forms of recreation. Yeah. Again, as long as we're not sinning in those things, and you can commit sin in any form of recreation just about by idolizing it. You can do it with an outdoor sport just as much as with a video game, just as much as with, hiding away in a corner with a book, or you can totally do that. But as long as you are using those things the way that God intends and in a balanced manner, they can be a form of recreation, which is necessary for us to have. We must stop and spend some time to ourselves, just having fun or getting our mind off of the things that stress us out, so we can recharge and be better equipped to do the work that God has called us to do. And I think video games are a great avenue for that.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to push back on one thing, because this kind of ties into it a little bit here, where Luke mentions not building a relationship with anyone. And something that I've noticed from reading just about kind of like Paul's ministry and being able to preach on that recently, is that one of the things that Paul did is that he met people where they were at, and so he observed their customs and brought examples of their culture in to establish that he was paying attention, but to also bring culture into it. You see him do this when he goes into, I forget where it is in Acts, but he's walking through the town and he notices that they've built these statues that say, "To the unknown God." And he walks into this big, giant, kind of like almost like university kind of academic building, and he's talking to the people, and he goes, I notice you guys value knowledge. I see you guys value academics. You guys are very intelligent. And I've noticed on my way in that you guys have statues that say, "To the unknown God." Well, I'm here to tell you, I know who that God is. And he brings the gospel into their culture. And one of the cool things about playing games, period, single player, multiplayer, doesn't matter, is that allows you to have a foothold into someone else's, world or area or whatever, so that you can then speak the gospel to them. That's one of the cool things that I like about, and this is a multiplayer game, but still serves the purpose, I think. One of the things I like about playing Fortnite, or even just engaging on social media, is it allows me to enter into the world that my students are in. It allows me to meet them where they're at, and then take those examples of what they're interacting with and then bring the gospel into it. And so I think playing a single player game or even a multiplayer game can help you build relationships with other people, because it opens the door to conversations. And it's the same thing. I mean, our podcast community is an example of that. You have people in the group that only play single player games, like Jonathan over here. And he's able to still interact with a lot of other Christians and make friends. And same thing with me. I mean, me and one of our dear listeners, Wesley Ray, we don't play games together, but we've played Pokemon, we've played Digimon, so we have that shared experience that allows us to get to know one another a little bit better. And we also have that shared faith in Christ. So I think it can. It just all, again, depends on how you use it. So,
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I totally forgot what I believe is maybe the best example in my personal life recently of this.
Okay.
Me only playing single player games. My wife and I serve together at our church in a little ministry that helps prep dating or engaged couples for marriage. It's not marriage counseling. I'm not qualified for actual marriage counseling, but it's just a little 8-week class where we lead a table in a group of people. We're like, hey, let's talk about communication. Let's talk about roles in marriage. Let's talk about this, just kind of help have conversations. And so we minister there, and we had all the couples at our table over for dinner one night just to get to know them better. And I could tell one of the guys was a little more timid, a little more closed off. He was he was fine, but he didn't really want to get into it. And he walked in my front door and saw a PS4, and he was like, "You play games?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude. I play, I play Nintendo stuff, play PS4 stuff." He's like, "Dude, me too." And then his eyes lit up, and all of a sudden he's like, we're talking about it. And he's like, "Yeah, but I have an Xbox." And I was like, "How about that Sea of Thieves?" And he was like, "Dude, yeah, I've been playing Sea of Thieves." And he's like, I'm like, I think at the time he was looking forward to playing it. We talked about it after he got it. But I mean, he's going back and forth about what he thinks they should fix and how much fun he's having with his friends. And man, after that conversation, it was an open door, and anything I said, he was listening to me, because I met him at a point of interest of his, and we only talked about games for a few minutes, and then everything else I said, he was in with it. And so that was just an accidental inroad to just having a conversation with this guy, and him trusting me and being like, okay, this guy isn't some stuck up churchy guy. He's just a guy that plays video games like me, and that really spoke to him. So I love that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Same exact thing has happened just with my own students. Like when I first came to the church where we're serving at now, and there's always that rough patch first couple of months, because a lot of the students are still sizing you up and trying to figure you out, and all that kind of stuff. And there was a couple of boys who I didn't really have a whole lot in common with them at all outside of video games. Like I would try to ask what their interests are, and they wouldn't really want to talk a whole lot. But then one Wednesday night I came in wearing a Zelda shirt. I had just the Hylian crest on a green shirt, nice. And they just saw it and they were like you like Zelda? I'm like, yeah, I like Zelda. I love Zelda. He's like, what have you played any of them? I'm like almost all of them.
It's like, nope, just saw the shirt at Target and it looked awesome, so I bought it.
It's all what the cool kids are wearing. I figured I'd wear it too. But we just had the conversation, and I had my Switch in my backpack, and I had showed it off to him. He's like, "Oh my gosh, you've got a Switch! I want one." And so just like that, way into the conversation, and all of a sudden those walls start coming down into where we can start talking about the Bible, and to where now they all of a sudden want to hear what I have to say, just because I've shown that an interest in things that they have interest in that aren't sin in as of itself. While it can be if it's idolized, but that they're as a lot of people see me and they think I'm just kind of some holier than thou person that wants to just tell them how to live their life, to where they're like, look, I'm a person just like you are. and
Yeah.
talk about that and how that relates, and how like I like playing video games in my free time. How about you? And we start talking about that, and I talk about how it relates to my how video games relate to my walk with Christ, and just having those kind of that weigh in on that Kickstarter of a conversation to lead into those ways to present the gospel.
I just remembered that my first year at camp as a youth pastor, I wore an Assassin's Creed hat, and a lot of kids that had played the games were like, "Oh, dude, that's Assassin's Creed," and we were talking about it. And I actually stopped and talked to the guy running sound at the event because he saw my hat and pointed it out. And me and him got to talking about just like ministry and kind of how he got into sound stuff. And apparently he made like a fan made like Assassin's Creed video on YouTube. I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to look it up. But yeah, man, even single player games, dude, you can use anything to meet people where they're at. I mean, it's what Jesus did. He met people where they're at, went into the world. He didn't try to drag people into his culture, his comfort zone to preach the gospel to them. He went to them where they're at, and we can do the same thing with video games. So guys, thank you for the questions, dear listeners. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Again, send any kind of questions you've got our way over at Twitter at TRG Podcast or in the Facebook group, or if you're on Patreon, patreon.com/thereformedgamers. But with that, episode 115 is coming to a close. But guys, before we let the dear listeners go, gotta do some recos here, brought to you by Richard Marroquin, who's been supporting us at the $25 tier on patreon.com. Jonathan, man, what should the dear listeners check out?
So mine's a little bit different, a little unique this week. It's not a video game, but it is related to video games.
Okay.
And I recommend checking out Super Mario Cereal.
Can you still get
I've
that?
heard.
Because that stuff sold out so quick. Can you get a hold of it?
No. So they sold out of like the Odyssey edition, but they've re-released it as just Super Mario. And on the front of the box now, it's just Mario and Peach and Bowser just sitting there.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
It's the same stuff.
My mom sent me a picture of it when she was grocery shopping. She's like, "Do you want me to get you this?" I'm like, "Are you gonna mail me a box of cereal?" I mean, okay.
Absolutely.
Yes. So like I first got it when it came out because I was like, it's Mario. I've got to do it. I love Mario. So I got a box and I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. And then Lisette got a hold of it. She was like, wow, this is actually really good because it's Kellogg's that makes it. Like,
would
they know
you
what they're
compare
doing.
it to anything like Pops or anything like that? Or is it very unique?
See, it's tough for me because like,
wait. Is Pops even around anymore?
Yeah, they are.
Is it really?
So first of all, I hate Pops.
I used to eat that stuff all the time. All right, sorry, go ahead.
I do not like Pops. I do not like Pops at all. But the only cereal we ever got as kids was like either Fruit Loops or Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and like even then we barely ever got it. It was like once in a great while. But we never did Lucky Charms. We never did it. I mean, I've had those at some point, but like we never really ate them. So I don't know what to compare it to. I mean, clearly it is a sweet sugary cereal with little marshmallow things in it, so it's like Lucky Charms. But I can't do like a accurate taste comparison. All I know is it's really good. It's really delicious, and I enjoy it.
You're not starting a cereal review channel anytime soon, is what you're saying.
Right, yeah.
I totally should.
So that's a perfect segue into... Next up, Assassin's Creed cereal.
Nice.
No, but, it's just... What's funny is like I've gotten a couple boxes, and then Lisette actually started really liking it a lot. And so she's like, she bought some on her own the other day and brought it home. And I was like, heck yeah. So, yeah. Super Mario cereal, it's good. I recommend it.
Right on. Derek, what about you, man?
I got a couple movies to recommend. One of them is Ready Player One. Such a fun time. And I'm a little biased because I'm a big Ty Sheridan fan. Me and him are from the same neck of the woods out in East Texas. But it's a fun movie. Yeah.
You know Cyclops?
Yeah, he went to high school with my brother. He played baseball, awesome. And then he actually, his first movie role, which was with Brad Pitt, they had a casting call, and he went on a dare, and out of like 1,000 kids, like won the part. And then after he made that one,
that's
incredible.
Yeah, it's insane. So yeah, I've actually got an autograph picture of him as Cyclops that one of my brother's friends got him to sign over just this past year. And so I root for him, but I definitely can say it's a fun movie, fun time. If you're a video game person, even just pop culture, when it's movies, anything like that, there's so many references. It's so fun to watch. Next recommendation. Okay, so I'm going to recommend the Tomb Raider movie, but don't freak out. I know. Stop.
Get him off the show.
Stop. Jonathan, kick him out of the Skype call.
Don't mute me. Don't turn off the episode. Just calm down and step away from the mute button. Everything's gonna be fine. As I said earlier, very start of the show, Tomb Raider, the video game movie. It's I honestly enjoyed it, and I went in there thinking, oh, this is gonna be garbage. I'm gonna hate it, but it is, in my opinion, the most accurate video game translation into a movie, because when you are watching it, like I'm convinced that the script for this movie was a Tomb Raider video game sequel that they just decided to turn into a movie. They had this script to go do this, and they were like, hey, let's just make a movie out of it and see if we can, get some traction or whatever. Because there are several points to where if you've played, whether it's a Tomb Raider game or Uncharted, like the quick time events, to where like there's a certain point in the game to where there's like a struggle and you gotta like mash the button to get free. There's literally like 2 or 3 of these, like that you would look at it at the scene, you're like, this is a quick time event, like because like there's one point, and like semi spoiler, as far as Lara Croft, she's getting choked by this person, and she's like fighting to struggle free, and she's like slowly like moving, like slowly like trying to get the the person's hand off of her neck, and I'm like, this is a point to where I would be like mashing square or something. And then
except you're like screaming at the screen at the theater. You're like, no, come on.
Like, mash, yeah. And so and then there's other points, and like it's a little predictable, but if you're just going for like the sake of the entertainment, and as far as the video game translation, like where if you've played like, let's say, the first Tomb Raider game, the reboot, to where things just go wrong all the time, and you think she's out of the neck of the woods, and stuff still continues to fall apart, go wrong. It happens in this movie, like 100%. And so that's where I'm talking about this. The script is very much like it came straight out of Square Enix, which of course Square Enix gets, the props and the opening credits. And so they were definitely heavily involved in this movie. So I'm convinced that it is. Now, of course, the script does, like, as far as the pacing of the movie, definitely suffers, just because it's like, again, they took an 18-hour story and squished it down to 2. And so
You know what I want? You know what I want some video game movie to do eventually is just have an entire 15-minute segment where the characters just running around like gathering collectibles and like going the wrong way and doubling back and then
grab
like
onto a ledge, like just not looking up or reaching up, but just jumping up and down,
Yeah, just jumping up and down. Yeah, running around in circles, like shooting shotgun into the air, like just a random stuff.
And then for them to go talk to someone and it just be text and not to be voice acted.
I feel like this would be like a sequel to Scott Pilgrim, if anything, because I could see that happening in that movie.
That movie was great.
So yeah, and like and we originally watched the Tomb Raider movie because my wife and I recently signed up for the Movie Pass. That's been all the hype lately. We didn't want to pay the $100 and something up front, so we went through the website and just did the $9.99 per month.
Oh yeah,
and that just was a lot easier. And so you just commit to watching one movie a month, and we decided to watch 2. Watch Ready Player One, watch Tomb Raider. Enjoyed them both, so definitely go watch it. It's a good time.
Nice. I'll probably end up checking it out, actually.
Yeah.
Same. Well, dear listeners, as far as my recos go, again, just a reminder, check out some of the Secret Church stuff that David Platt has put out. Like I said, I don't think this year's Cults and Counterfeit Gospels one, I don't think they have the videos up just yet, but I know they're going to be putting those live over the next few weeks, so just keep an eye on radical.net to see for when they go live. But also something that you can check out right now is Owlboy, this fantastic little indie game that came out that just kind of, game's so good, guys. I wrote a review for it. Dear listeners, I'll put the link to it in the show notes. Game is fantastic. It's like, just read the review, get my thoughts, and then if you want to check it out, go play it. It's available on PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, and PC. So there you go. Guys, thank you for coming on the show, doing a little 8-bit reunion. It was good to have the guys back together. It's good stuff. Thank you.
It was fun, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, blast. Man, so good.
And I dare say, I would dare say this second recording we had to do is even better than the first one we did.
I would agree.
I agree. Yeah.
Especially since we're not talking into tin cans,
Yeah.
Right. Also that.
As far as we know, hey, easy there, easy.
Probably just jinxed it. Anyway, dear listeners, if you'd like to contact us, you can follow us on Twitter at TRG Podcast. Join our Facebook group, The Reformed Gamers. Please answer all 3 questions that you get asked. Otherwise, if you don't answer the questions, we're going to think you're a robot and we'll just deny you. As always, if you like what we do here on the show, you can go over to patreon.com/reformgamers to lend your support, get some sweet, sweet swag in the process, and help our show grow even more. You can also check out our our reviews, articles, things like that we put on our website, thereformedgamers.wordpress.com, which shout out to our patrons because it's because of their support that we are now able to write more articles for the website, such as the Owlboy review, such as Adam's Why I Play Retro Video Games article. Great stuff over on the website. Head over there if you haven't checked it out recently. But until next time, dear listeners, GG and amen.